It was a warm Monday morning when Arya Sen walked through the towering gates of Rosewood High for the first time as a full-time faculty member. The school campus, surrounded by tall pine trees and lined with brick walkways, bustled with returning students, teachers catching up, and the hum of another academic year stretching ahead. At 24 years old, Arya was not just the youngest teacher on staff but also the most talked about. She had just graduated top of her class from one of the best universities in the state, turning down a prestigious research opportunity to teach at Rosewood High, a decision that had confused some and inspired others. Her dark hair was pinned in a low bun, a small chain glinted at her neck, and her sharp brown eyes were filled with a mixture of purpose and quiet determination. She had always believed that real change came from the ground up, from working with young minds before the world had crushed their sense of justice. And yet, Arya was not naive. She knew high school could be brutal. What she didn't expect was just how cruel, how unguarded, and how silently complicit the systems around her would prove to be. Her first few days passed with little incident. She taught English literature everything from Homer to Hughes, and her passion for the subject slowly won over even the most indifferent students. Her classroom was a space of lively debates and open minds, a small haven from the often rigid corridors of Rosewood. But even the most perfect havens attract storms, and hers was no different. Trouble began in her second week, disguised as a joke but laced with malice. Trent Callahan, the school star basketball player and the son of a powerful local politician, walked into her third-period class late, tossed his bag onto a desk, and commented loud enough for the room to hear, "Didn't know Rosewood started hiring babysitters." The room chuckled, more out of fear than amusement. Arya paused mid-sentence, met his gaze without blinking, and replied calmly, "And I didn't know Rosewood gave out varsity letters for poor manners." The students froze. Trent's smirk faded, just a bit. That was the moment she marked a target on her back. Over the next few weeks, it escalated. First came the subtle jabs, comments about her clothes, whispers during lectures, laughter that broke the rhythm of her teaching. Trent and his group of elite friends, Tyler Boone and Max Reyes, were the kind of students teachers were quietly warned not to discipline too harshly. Their parents donated generously to the school, and their transcripts were handled with silk gloves. But Arya didn't play by the rules of fear. She gave failing grades when they earned them. She reported inappropriate behavior. She demanded accountability. And that's when things turned ugly. By the time Spirit Week arrived, a traditional school event where students and faculty dressed up according to daily themes, the tension had reached a boiling point. Friday was Retro Day. Students came decked out in 70s bell-bottoms, 80s neon, and 90s grunge. Arya had chosen to participate subtly, wearing a crisp white blouse with puffed sleeves tucked into high-waisted jeans, a respectful nod to vintage style. She wore her confidence like armor, walking the halls with her satchel and lesson plan in hand, unaware of the ambush waiting around the corner. During lunch break, students gathered in the courtyard, music blaring from portable speakers, laughter bouncing off brick walls. Arya, taking a rare break from grading, decided to join the other teachers supervising the area. She stood near the bench beneath the old oak tree, chatting with a few students about their Spirit Week experiences, when she heard a familiar, mocking voice behind her. "Miss Sen," Trent called out, loud enough to draw attention. "You missed the memo, it's Retro Day, not librarian chic." A few students laughed nervously. Arya turned calmly, her expression unreadable. "Appreciate the fashion advice, Trent," she replied, already turning away. But he wasn't done. He stepped closer, emboldened by the crowd, and with one swift, calculated move, reached out and yanked at the front of her blouse, ripping several buttons clean off. The fabric tore with a loud snap, exposing her camisole underneath and sending gasps rippling through the courtyard. The noise stopped. Conversations died. Music faded into the background as if the world itself recoiled. Arya froze in place, one hand instinctively covering her chest, her face draining of color. Trent stood back, grinning like a victorious gladiator in the arena. His friends laughed, loud, cruel laughter that echoed across the stunned silence. Students fumbled with their phones. At least one person was recording. Then Arya slowly reached into her satchel, pulled out her emergency blazer, and buttoned it up with shaking hands. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But her eyes, oh, her eyes, were fire. Pure, unfiltered fire. She turned toward the crowd and did something no one expected. She walked directly to the front office and requested use of the auditorium mic. When the confused vice principal asked why, Arya simply responded, "Because silence is consent, and I'm not going to be silent." Within minutes, the intercom crackled through the school speakers. "All students and faculty, please report to the auditorium for an urgent assembly." Immediately. The buzz spread like wildfire. Whispers filled the halls. Phones continued to vibrate with the video clip already making its rounds online. By the time the auditorium filled, there wasn't a seat left. The air was thick with tension. Arya stood on the stage alone, still buttoned in her navy blazer, the torn blouse beneath a painful memory concealed by professionalism. She stepped up to the microphone, her voice amplified, steady despite the storm inside her. "Good afternoon," she began, eyes sweeping across the crowd. "I'm Miss Arya Senator. Some of you know me as your English teacher. Some of you barely notice me. But today, I'm here as something else, someone who was publicly humiliated in front of this school." Gasps echoed. A few teachers shifted uncomfortably. The vice principal stepped forward, but Arya raised her hand without looking and continued. "Earlier today, in the courtyard, a student decided it was acceptable to violate me in front of dozens of people, to rip my clothing and laugh about it as though it were entertainment. And I want everyone here to understand, this is not just a prank. It is not a joke. It is an assault. And what's worse is that it happened under the watch of students and staff alike who said nothing." Murmurs spread like wildfire. Some students looked down in shame. Others stared, wide-eyed. A few nodded slowly. "I came to Rosewood because I believed in this school's potential to be better. But if the culture here is one that protects power and punishes integrity, then I'm not just fighting for myself, I'm fighting for every girl who has been catcalled in the hallway, every student mocked for their weight, their identity, their background. Enough is enough." There was a stillness after her words that felt eternal. Then, from the back of the auditorium, a voice rose. It was Jamila, one of Arya's junior students, smart, outspoken, brave. Her phone was in her hand, and the footage was already cued. Arya gave a small nod. The video played. The rip. The laughter. The cold, brutal reality. The silence that followed was unlike anything Rosewood had heard before. Arya stepped back to the mic. "Now that you've seen it, ask yourselves what kind of school you want this to be." The auditorium erupted, not in chaos, but in unity. Students stood. One by one at first, then in waves. Teachers, too. Clapping. Cheering. Chanting. "We stand with Miss Sun." Even students who had laughed with Trent were now shaken. Some were crying. Others recorded the standing ovation as Arya stood motionless, overcome with emotion but refusing to break. That afternoon, the superintendent visited the school. Trent Callahan, Tyler Boone, and Max Reyes were suspended indefinitely pending investigation. Trent's father tried to push back, but the video had already gone viral. News channels picked it up. Parents flooded the school with calls of support for Arya. The vice principal resigned quietly within a week. And Arya Sen? She stayed. Not just as a teacher, but as a leader. She was offered a new role, Director of Student Advocacy and Safety. She started programs for consent education, bullying intervention, and student mentorship. Students, especially girls, came to her not just for English help, but for guidance, protection, and courage. They tore her shirt in public. But her next move? It didn't just shock the school.